someone who's been making a few headlines last week, albeit for different reasons than AJ, but someone who maybe is on the decline and maybe is still improving. You could have that same debate, and that's Chris Eubank Jr., who was, for many people until recently, the hottest free agent, certainly in UK boxing, has now been snapped up in a partnership agreement with Ben Shalom's boxer to have his next 2 fights, we believe, at least, on Sky Sports Boxing, as he was previously when he was fighting under a Wasserman contract. Eamon, did you think that Boxer would be the ones who ended up getting his signature?
Yeah, I think they were in a strong position because of the Sky Sports element and Chris Eubank Jr.'s recent kind of outings on Sky Sports and the pay-per-view element to Sky Sports as well too. Of course, DAZN have a pay-per-view element as well, but I think there's more history there with Chris, and the machine's just a bit bigger than it is than DAZN's is right now. So you can see that with Chris having already that brand recognition there and people remembering and buying those pay-per-views from Sky, that would be the pole position for him to, or the most likeliest place that he would land, given some of the landscape and some of the options on the table. It wasn't going to go abroad to the PBC because the PBC are much different to the way that they were when Chris Eubank Jr. first signed with the PBC, and also how that ended. Wasserman, obviously, he left there. Queensbury, I don't know if there was much interest. I think Frank Warren has stated before in the past that he'd never worked with Chris Eubank Jr. or Senior again, which only really left Eddie Hearn in the UK, and of course abroad, as he'll say, is a world promoter. But the interest for them was to make the Conor Benn fight, and seemingly, according to Eddie Hearn, he wanted 2 easy fights, which Eddie wouldn't give him. We'll see if those 2 easy fights are the case, and Ben Shalom will be serving those up for him. But at least some form of run out will probably be most likely. I think what probably is the kicker here is the fact that it's a partnership deal, and what that entails, I'm not too sure. Whether that's a cut of the percentage of a bigger cut of the percentage of the revenue, if it's something similar to what Dylan White does, where he has more of a say as who's on the undercard and he features more of his fighters, although there isn't really Chris Eubank Jr. having a following of fighters like Dylan White does, although he might want to give back to the Brighton scene, the likes of Scott and Tommy Welsh or Harlem Eubank, some of his relatives, I guess, maybe. But I just wonder what that entails as to the partnership deal, and it might give her a bigger piece of the pie that Eddie Hearn and DAZN were willing to offer. I thought a large part of this would be predicated on who could give him the quickest ticket to Saudi. But that ticket was being presented by Frank Warren and Queensbury, but he declined that. And I think his vision and goal really is to get that Canelo Alvarez fight. And it seems to be that Ben Shalom is negotiating on his behalf to get that. And if Ben Shalom can get that over the line, it's a pretty good feather in the cap for Ben Shalom, who's been, maligned by his rival promoters as someone who maybe fumbles or doesn't get those big deals over the line. If he does get that over the line, then fair play to Ben, who's delivered for his client and then delivers a big fight in the UK, if it happens in the UK or whatever. A big interest from the UK audience for Canelo Alvarez, for Chris Eubank Jr., with other fights not really on the horizon for Chris, especially at middleweight. So, yeah, I imagine that would be the way that Chris Eubank Jr. would go, and it's a good signing for boxer and Ben Shalom.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I know I spoke to Frank Smith last week. He said they were talking to Eubank Jr. right up until I think it was Saturday before it was announced in the early hours. I think it was of Sunday morning that he joined Boxer in this partnership agreement. And it wasn't that they didn't want to give him 2 easy fights necessarily. It was that they couldn't fit 2 in the schedule before they wanted to run the Conor Benn fight early in 2025. They just couldn't fit him on. Maybe it was a financial thing as well. He probably was well reimbursing for these gimme fights, as Eddie Hearn called them. So I kind of get that. Whereas Boxer haven't got the time pressure of putting on a Conor Benn fight early next year. So they can afford to bring Eubank Jr. back slowly, invest in him a little bit, and then hope to get it over the line. And if they do get the Canelo fight done for September, I said this to Ben Shalom off record last week. We had a little chat. And I said to him, if he loses to to Canelo, as most people would, most reasonable people would expect him to, the fights with the likes of Conor Benn and, I don't know, Josh Kelly, if he wins his next fight, and people like that, Hamza Shiraz, they'll all still be there. It's same with Amir Khan choosing to fight Canelo instead of Kell Brook. He knew, and he was proved right, that the Kell Brook fight would always be there. And I'm not saying it's always in Eubank's case, but a lot of the fights that are being talked about at the moment, whether it's Shiraz, whether it's Benn, whether it's a comeback in Billy Joe Saunders, they'll be there if he loses to Canelo. As long as he doesn't get wiped out in a round, and nothing suggests that he will, I think he can rebuild quite easily in the UK. And Boxer and Sky Sports probably the best platform to do so on. From Frank Warren's position, he stated that they were never in any negotiations to sign Eubank to a long-term deal. The only talks they had with his people were to make the Shiraz fight. And when it became clear that Eubank wasn't interested in that, and I can understand why, he's got everything to lose in that fight, not a great deal to gain, that's when talks ended. And Frank Warren says he sees Eubank Jr. at this stage of his career as a stepping stone, which is interesting because I'm not sure. I think there's a bit of life in the old dog yet. And it's hard to say someone's on the decline or a stepping stone when they are coming off the best performance of their career in the revenge victory over Liam Smith. Now, a lot of question marks around that because of Liam Smith cutting so much weight in a short space of time. And we'll never know how Eubank would have dealt with a, fully firing Liam Smith in that rematch. However, judging it at face value, that's the best Eubank Jr. has ever looked at that level. So I think he's still got something to offer. But let's see what the chat's saying. Eubank is a great troll, said Dennis Backtoff. Has Eddie and Conor on strings. Their hate is now embarrassing. Coming across very desperate on all boxing media interviews. DB Cooper 1, Eubank Jr. must be the only guy, I think you said this last week, DB Cooper 1. The only guy who lives in Vegas full-time to party, gamble, and then move out for training. It ought to be the other way around. You definitely made this comment last week. And I hope I forgot to read it out then, because otherwise I've played into your hands. Larry Liston, Canelo versus Eubank could be a huge fight in the UK. Big stadium fight. People will flock to the arena to get a glimpse of Canelo. With that being said, Eubank is getting sparked out in the mid-rounds. I agree. I think it's similar to when Golovkin came over and fought Kell Brook in Sheffield. I think, was it in Sheffield? No. Was it in Sheffield or London? Yeah. So that was a huge event. Kell Brook didn't really lose anything. I mean, he might have lost years of his career because of the way it ended. Now he got busted up and broke his eye socket. But what I mean is, he didn't lose his standing for those big domestic fights through losing to a world-class pound-for-pound star in Golovkin. And I think it'd be similar for Eubank against Canelo. The problem is, Canelo's beaten a lot of British fighters at this point. And from my knowledge, he's never shown much of an inclination to come here to do it. He's always seemed to still want to do it in either Mexico or Vegas. So I'm not sure how realistic getting him over here is. Larry Liston, agree with Eamon, would be the career highlight for Ben to get Eubank that Canelo fight. Thunder Road, I can see Adam Mazine versus Harlem Eubank on an undercard of Eubank Jr. fight. Senior and Junior sharing a press conference again. Well, I'm wondering what's happening with Adam Mazine, Harlem Eubank. Were they just brought together to kind of shake hands and make friends in that highly publicized in-ring face-off? That's got to be at least 6 months ago, if not more, and still no fight date has been announced. So maybe they were just waiting to get the signature of Harlem's cousin first. I'm not sure. DB Cooper 1, no way he gets the Canelo fight over Belanga. He should have fought Hamza Shiraz on a Riyadh show and gone for a world title. Boxer are going to blow the budget on him. What happened to investing in talent? Well, they'll be hoping that they can generate the profile and the money from the sort of signing that Eubank Jr. is, the profile he's got, and then reinvest that in their young talent. Whether that's a smart strategy or not, only time will tell. Dennis Backtoff, was Eubank grieving the death of his brother during Liam Smith 1? Seems the Smiths always have excuses. I'm not sure how true that is. Certainly not Stephen Smith, who came up short in a couple of world title fights. I don't remember him making many excuses. And Liam's always come across as quite an honest guy to me as well. As for Eubank grieving Seb Eubank's death, and he is much missed. I remember interviewing Seb, lovely, lovely guy. I'm not sure how long. I mean, I guess you're always grieving if someone that close to you passes. But I'm not sure how long after his passing it was, if that's what you're asking. Dennis Backtoff goes on to say he didn't want to lose the payday, blame the weight cut to justify another payday. We're being taken for mugs. I'm not sure how true that is either. And Liam Smith's not here to defend himself, so we shouldn't be too critical of him.